Welcome to our deep dive today into the book of Deuteronomy.
It's
like a pep talk
it is.
and a rule book all rolled into one, delivered by Moses to the Israelites right before they entered the Promised Land.
Yep.
We are going to unpack all those big ideas,
Yeah.
uncover some surprising details,
For sure.
and see why this book still matters
Right.
thousands of years later.
Yeah, it's amazing how Deuteronomy blends history law and spirituality so seamlessly.
Right.
It's not just a dry list of rules, but a call to remember,
Right.
to choose wisely,
Yeah.
and to really understand the impact of those choices.
Yeah, the name itself is interesting. Deuteronomy means second law. So it's almost like Moses is hitting rewind, reminding the Israelites of everything they've learned during those 40 years wandering in the wilderness.
And that context is so important.
Yeah.
This is a new generation about to face the same promises and challenges as their parents.
Right.
Deuteronomy is meant to prepare them, but also to warn them against repeating the same mistakes.
Speaking of mistakes, remember that story about the spies
Oh,
who
yeah.
were sent into Canaan?
Yeah.
Only 2 out of 12
Wow.
had enough faith to believe that they could conquer the land.
Yeah.
Really shows how doubt and fear
Right.
can hold people back.
Exactly. Deuteronomy keeps coming back to the idea of remembering God's faithfulness, remembering the consequences of disobedience.
Right.
It's like the Israelites' collective memory is being shaped to guide their future.
Yeah. And it's not just about remembering the past. It's about understanding how their choices impact future generations.
Yes.
Deuteronomy makes it clear that blessings and curses aren't just for individuals, but for the nation as a whole.
Right.
That's a powerful concept, isn't it?
It is. It's a concept that resonates even today. Think about how our actions today, on a personal, national, or even global level, can have ripple effects for generations to come.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Deuteronomy sets the stage with Moses addressing the Israelites beyond the Jordan. They're literally at the doorstep of the Promised Land.
Right.
Talk about a pivotal moment.
It is a moment filled with both anticipation and trepidation.
Yeah.
They're about to enter a new land,
Yeah.
face new challenges, and build a new society.
And to guide them,
Yeah.
Deuteronomy lays out a comprehensive set of laws and principles.
Right.
It reiterates the 10 Commandments and emphasizes the importance of following God's laws. There's this strong emphasis on loving and fearing God.
Right.
But when Deuteronomy talks about fear, it's not about being terrified.
No, it's more about reverence and awe.
Right.
Recognizing God's power and authority.
Right.
It's about understanding the magnitude of their relationship with God.
It's like that feeling you get when you stand on the edge of a vast canyon. You're humbled by the immensity of it all.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And Deuteronomy doesn't just focus on the big picture of loving and fearing God.
Right.
It also gets very specific about how the Israelites should treat each other.
Right. There are detailed laws about justice and compassion, especially when it comes to the vulnerable, the poor, orphans, widows, and even foreigners.
Right.
It's clear that a just society is at the heart of Deuteronomy's message.
This focus on social justice is something that continues to challenge us today. How do we ensure that our own communities are marked by fairness, compassion, and care for those who are most in need?
It's a question worth pondering.
It is.
And speaking of challenging questions, Deuteronomy doesn't shy away from laying out the consequences of disobedience.
Right.
There's some pretty vivid descriptions of curses that will befall the Israelites if they stray from the covenant.
And those curses aren't just for individuals.
Right.
They extend to the nation as a whole.
Right.
So Deuteronomy really drives home the point that their choices have collective consequences.
Yeah. It makes you wonder what kind of legacy we're leaving for future generations.
It does.
Doesn't it? Are we building a society that's based on justice and compassion? Or are we setting ourselves up for some of those consequences?
It's a sobering thought.
Right.
And one that Deuteronomy compels us to consider.
Absolutely. And all of this is woven into a powerful narrative that unfolds throughout the book.
Right.
There's a clear structure to Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
It begins with Moses recapping their journey from Egypt, highlighting both God's faithfulness and the people's struggles.
Right.
Then it lays out the laws and commandments that are meant to guide their lives in the Promised Land.
Yes.
And finally, it concludes with Moses passing the torch to Joshua, entrusting him with the responsibility of leading the people forward.
That leadership transition from Moses to Joshua is fascinating in itself.
Yeah.
Here's Moses, after all he's been through, stepping aside and appointing a successor. It speaks volumes about trust delegation and the importance of preparing the next generation.
It's like a master class in leadership succession planning.
Exactly. And interwoven throughout Deuteronomy is this incredibly powerful song composed by Moses. It's like a haunting melody that captures the complexities of their journey, both the highs and the lows.
It's almost as if Moses, knowing his own death is near, leaves the Israelites with a song that will both inspire and warn them. It's a reminder that even in the midst of God's promises, human choices still matter.
And the Song of Moses isn't just a historical artifact. It's a timeless message that continues to resonate with us today. What are the songs we're leaving behind for future generations?
Wow, yeah.
What lessons will they learn from our choices and actions?
Those are definitely some thought-provoking questions.
Let's dive a bit deeper into this journey. Starting with the specific chapters of Deuteronomy. In the first chapter, we're thrown right into a dramatic retelling of the Israelites' journey from Egypt to the edge of the Promised Land.
It's like a previously on recap, highlighting the pivotal moments that have shaped their identity as a people. We hear about the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea, the provision of manna in the desert, and the giving of the law at Mount Sinai. It's a powerful reminder of God's faithfulness and the Israelites' dependence on him.
And then in chapter 2, we encounter a rather surprising detail. The Israelites are instructed to avoid conflict with certain neighboring nations, like the Edomites, Moabites, and Ammonites. What's interesting here is that these nations are actually related to the Israelites.
Oh, wow.
The Edomites are descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother, while the Moabites and Ammonites descend from Lot, Abraham's nephew.
So instead of engaging in battles, they're told to seek peaceful passage and even purchase food and water from these relatives. It's an unexpected approach, especially considering their history of conquest.
This directive highlights an important principle. Even in the midst of claiming their own land, they're called to respect the boundaries and sovereignty of others, even those with whom they share a common ancestry.
It emphasizes the importance of peaceful coexistence and challenges us to consider how we interact with those who may be different from us or even hold opposing views.
Precisely. Claiming one's inheritance doesn't necessitate the subjugation of those around them. Deuteronomy reminds us that a more nuanced approach, one marked by diplomacy and respect for others, can lead to a more harmonious outcome.
Then in chapter 3, we see the Israelites' conquest of the land of Bashan, ruled by King Og. This is where we encounter another interesting detail. Og is described as a giant, the last of the Rephaim, a race of formidable stature. It's like stepping into a mythical epic.
That description of Og truly emphasizes the scale of the challenge the Israelites faced. They're not just battling armies. They're confronting obstacles that seem impossible to overcome. Yet despite the odds, they emerge victorious. It's a powerful symbol of God's unwavering support, reminding us that with faith and determination, we can overcome even the most daunting challenges.
It's like that boost of confidence you need when facing a seemingly insurmountable task. If the Israelites could conquer giants, surely we can overcome our own obstacles,
Absolutely. And that brings us to chapter 4. Where Deuteronomy takes a more introspective turn, focusing on the importance of remembering the lessons learned during their wilderness journey.
Moses repeatedly urges the Israelites to remember the events they've witnessed, the laws they've received, and the covenant they've entered into with God. He's imprinting these experiences on their hearts and minds, ensuring that they're not forgotten. It goes beyond mere historical recollection.
Right.
It's about integrating those experiences into their present and future.
It's about learning from their past mistakes, appreciating the blessings they've received,
right,
and recognizing the consequences of forgetting or abandoning their covenant with God. And it's not just about remembering, but also about passing that knowledge on to future generations.
Moses instructs the Israelites to teach their children diligently.
Right.
About their history, their laws, and their relationship with God.
It's like a blueprint for passing on a legacy of faith.
Right.
That intergenerational transmission of knowledge and values is a crucial theme that we still grapple with today.
Right.
How do we effectively pass on the wisdom and lessons we've learned to the next generation?
It's a question worth pondering.
It is.
Especially as we think about the challenges and opportunities that future generations will face.
Now, in Chapter 5, we revisit the Ten Commandments, the foundation of the covenant between God and the Israelites.
It's like a refresher course in their ethical and moral framework. And it's not just about memorizing a list of rules.
Right.
The Ten Commandments address a wide range of human behavior, from worshiping the one true God to honoring parents, respecting life and property, and upholding truth and integrity.
It provides a framework for building a just and harmonious society.
Right. It's a blueprint that still resonates today as we strive to create communities where individuals are treated with dignity and respect.
And it all comes back to that personal responsibility. Each individual is accountable for their actions.
Right.
And their choices have consequences.
It's like a reminder that we're not passive recipients of God's grace.
Right.
We have an active role to play in shaping our destiny.
Exactly.
And speaking of shaping our destiny, let's move on to Chapter 6.
Chapter 6 delves into the heart of the covenant, focusing on the central commandment to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might.
Yeah.
This goes beyond just outward actions.
Right.
It's about cultivating a deep and abiding love for God that permeates every aspect of life.
Like that feeling of complete devotion and surrender.
Right.
When your love for God guides your thoughts, your actions, and your relationships with others.
Exactly. And Deuteronomy emphasizes integrating this love for God into everyday life. Moses instructs the Israelites to teach their children diligently about God's love, weaving these teachings into their daily routines. Faith becomes a lived experience, not just a set of abstract beliefs.
It's about making faith part of, like, family culture. Creating an environment where God's presence is felt in everything you do.
Yes.
It makes me think about how we can intentionally create those kinds of spaces in our own homes and communities.
That's a great point. And as we cultivate this deep love for God, Chapter 7 reminds us to be vigilant against distractions. It provides specific instructions regarding the Israelites' interactions with the inhabitants of the Promised Land, the Canaanite nations.
This is where we encounter a challenging aspect of Deuteronomy. The command to conquer and destroy these nations, leaving no survivors.
It's a passage that has sparked a lot of debate and controversy over the centuries. It raises questions about the nature of God's justice and the role of violence in fulfilling divine purposes.
How do we reconcile this command with the emphasis on justice and compassion that we see throughout Deuteronomy?
It's definitely a complex issue, and there are many different perspectives on how to interpret and understand these passages. Some scholars point to the historical context, suggesting that these commands reflect the brutal realities of ancient warfare and the need to secure the Israelites' survival in a hostile environment. Others focus on the theological implications, arguing that these commands symbolize the absolute sovereignty of God and the imperative to eliminate idolatry and its corrupting influence. It's crucial to approach these passages with humility and sensitivity, recognizing the ethical and theological complexities that have challenged interpreters throughout history.
Regardless of your interpretation, this chapter undeniably highlights the dangers of idolatry and the importance of remaining faithful to God's covenant.
It's a cautionary tale about the seductive power of cultural assimilation and the importance of maintaining a distinct identity rooted in one's faith.
That makes me think about the pressures we face today to conform to societal norms.
Right.
Or compromise our values for the sake of acceptance.
Yeah.
How do we stay true to our convictions in a world that often pulls us in different directions?
It's a challenge we all face.
Yeah.
And Deuteronomy reminds us that true faithfulness requires discernment,
right,
courage, and a willingness to stand apart when necessary.
And speaking of challenges,
yeah,
chapter 8 shifts gears to focus on gratitude and remembering God's faithfulness.
Right.
Moses reminds the Israelites how God provided for them in the wilderness, the miraculous manna, the guiding pillar of cloud and fire.
It's a call to cultivate thankfulness, even when facing difficulties.
It's about recognizing God's hand in our lives, even amidst hardship. And it's also a warning against complacency.
Right.
Moses reminds them that their prosperity isn't guaranteed.
Yes.
It's contingent on their continued faithfulness. Forgetting God would lead to their downfall.
Exactly.
That's such an important reminder for us today. It's easy to take our blessings for granted or become self-reliant,
right,
forgetting that everything we have is ultimately a gift.
Right, and that brings us to chapter 9.
Okay.
A sobering reflection on the Israelites' past failures and their tendency toward rebellion.
Moses recounts the incident of the golden calf. A stark reminder of their capacity to stray from God,
right,
even after experiencing his miraculous deliverance.
It's like a public confession of their shortcomings. Right.
It's a reminder that even those who have experienced God's faithfulness can fall prey to temptation.
And it highlights the crucial role of repentance and forgiveness in restoring our relationship with God.
It also highlights the importance of grace.
Right.
Even when the Israelites messed up, and they messed up a lot, God was always ready to forgive and offer a new beginning.
That's so encouraging. It reminds me that no matter how far we stray, God's love and mercy are always available to us.
And that theme of repentance and renewal continues in chapter 10, where the focus shifts to the importance of a transformed heart and a renewed commitment to God's covenant.
True obedience goes beyond external actions. It stems from a heart that's truly aligned with God's will.
Moses uses the metaphor of a circumcised heart, a heart that's receptive to God's will, and transformed by his love.
It's about aligning our deepest desires with God's commands. And this transformation should be reflected in how we treat others, particularly those who are different from us. Chapter 10 also reiterates the importance of loving the foreigner, reminding the Israelites that they were once strangers in a foreign land.
It's a call to extend compassion and hospitality to those who may be marginalized or excluded.
It challenges us to think about how we treat immigrants, refugees, and anyone who might be considered an outsider in our own communities.
It's a timeless reminder that our faith should motivate us to act justly and love mercy. And speaking of consequences, chapter 11 gets into the blessings and curses associated with obedience and disobedience to God's covenant.
Moses presents a stark contrast. Prosperity, health, and abundance for those who remain faithful, versus famine, disease, and defeat for those who stray from the path.
It's a cosmic balance sheet, highlighting the impact of our choices.
It makes you think about the long-term consequences of our actions.
Not just for ourselves, but for future generations.
It certainly does.
And it emphasizes the importance of teaching God's commands to our children, ensuring that the next generation understands the importance of staying true to the covenant.
It's about creating a culture where faith is woven into the fabric of everyday life, shaping our thoughts, words, and actions.
Now, chapter 12 delves into specific instructions regarding worship, outlining the importance of centralizing their sacrifices and offerings at a place chosen by God. This was meant to counteract the scattered and often corrupt practices of worship found in the surrounding Canaanite cultures.
So it's about creating a sacred space where the people can gather to honor God and reaffirm their commitment to the covenant.
It makes me think about how important it is for us to have those dedicated spaces, whether it's a physical building or a time set aside each day,
where we can connect with God and recharge our spiritual batteries.
Absolutely.
And those sacred spaces should be places of unity and shared joy.
Right.
Chapter 12 also emphasizes the importance of sharing in the blessings of the sacrifices, ensuring that the Levites, the priests who serve at the sanctuary, are provided for and included in the community's celebrations.
It's a reminder that worship should be inclusive, bringing people together rather than creating divisions. Now, chapter 13 tackles the challenging issue of false prophets and those who might tempt the Israelites to stray from their covenant with God.
Moses warns against those who perform signs and wonders or proclaim messages that contradict God's commands.
It's a call to be discerning, to test the spirits and make sure they align with God's truth.
In today's world where we're bombarded with so much information and so many different voices,
it's more important than ever to develop that discernment. How do we know what to believe? Who do we trust?
Those are vital questions. And Deuteronomy reminds us to ground ourselves in God's revealed truth as found in his word and the teachings of those who have gone before us. We need to be cautious of charismatic leaders or appealing ideologies that might pull us away from God's path.
It's like having a spiritual compass that guides us through the confusing and often contradictory messages we encounter in the world.
Precisely. And that brings us to chapter 14. Which provides a fascinating look into the dietary laws and regulations that govern the Israelites' lives.
It outlines the distinctions between clean and unclean animals and the types of food that were permitted and forbidden.
These dietary laws had multiple purposes, They promoted health and hygiene, set the Israelites apart as a distinct people, and symbolized the importance of purity and holiness in their relationship with God.
It's about aligning your physical habits with your spiritual commitments. Even something as simple as eating can be an act of devotion and obedience.
It makes me think about how our choices, even in seemingly mundane areas of life, can reflect our values and our relationship with God.
That's a great insight.
And it's not just about personal piety. Chapter 14 also emphasizes the importance of sharing their abundance with those less fortunate.
Instructing them to leave the gleanings of their harvests for the poor widows and foreigners.
It's a reminder that our blessings should lead to generosity and compassion towards those in need.
And that brings us to chapter 15, which delves into the complex issue of debt and servitude.
It provides guidelines for treating debtors fairly and ensuring that those who have fallen into poverty aren't exploited or permanently enslaved.
It highlights the importance of social justice and economic equity. Even in a system where debt and servitude were permitted, there were safeguards in place to prevent abuse and exploitation.
Exactly. It's about creating a society where individuals aren't trapped in cycles of poverty or permanently marginalized due to their economic circumstances.
And it's a reminder that our own experiences of hardship or vulnerability should shape how we treat others. We should be motivated by empathy and a commitment to justice for all.
Now, chapter 16 outlines the three major festivals that structured the Israelites' religious calendar. Passover, Pentecost, and the Feast of Booths.
These festivals commemorated significant events in their history, celebrated God's provision and deliverance, and provided opportunities for the people to gather worship and reaffirm their covenant with God.
It's about creating a rhythm of remembrance and celebration, weaving faith into the fabric of their year, and ensuring that their relationship with God remains central to their lives.
It's like those special occasions and holidays that we celebrate today. They provide a time to reflect, connect with loved ones, and renew our sense of purpose and belonging.
You've got it. And these festivals were also powerful reminders of God's faithfulness, his power to deliver, and his ongoing presence in their lives.
They offered a chance to express gratitude, seek forgiveness, and recommit to living in accordance with God's will.
Now, in chapter 17, we shift gears to address legal and administrative matters.
It provides guidelines for appointing judges, dealing with idolatry and apostasy,
right,
and establishing a monarchy if the people so desired. This chapter highlights the importance of establishing a just and orderly society where laws are upheld, disputes are resolved fairly, and leadership is guided by God's principles.
It's about creating a framework for governance that promotes righteousness, protects the vulnerable, and ensures that the community flourishes under God's blessing.
And if the Israelites chose to have a king, he was to be held to a high standard. The king was warned against accumulating excessive wealth, having too many wives, or leading the people back to Egypt.
These restrictions were designed to keep the king humble, focused on God, and committed to the well-being of the nation.
It's a reminder that even those in positions of authority are accountable to God and are expected to lead with justice and integrity.
Chapter 18 delves into the roles and responsibilities of the Levites, the priestly tribe. It also addresses the issue of divination and sorcery.
So it's about recognizing the importance of spiritual leadership and making sure that those who serve in religious roles are supported and respected. And it also draws a clear line between seeking guidance from God and dabbling in occult practices.
Exactly. Moses condemned practices like divination, sorcery, and necromancy, which were common in the surrounding Canaanite cultures. It emphasized that true wisdom and guidance come from God alone.
It's a reminder to be wary of anything that might lead us away from God or compromise our faith.
And that brings us to chapter 19, which introduces the concept of cities of refuge.
This provision highlights the importance of justice tempered with mercy. It recognized that not all killings were intentional, and that there should be a way to protect those who had made accidental errors.
It's a beautiful example of how justice and compassion can work together. And the chapter also emphasizes the importance of fair legal proceedings, requiring multiple witnesses to establish guilt and condemning false testimony.
It's about making sure that justice is grounded in truth and impartiality, not on hearsay or personal vendettas.
Now, chapter 20 provides guidelines for warfare, outlining the conditions under which the Israelites were permitted to engage in battle.
It's about ensuring that their military actions were aligned with God's purposes. And that they didn't engage in wars of aggression or conquest for personal gain.
There's a clear distinction between offensive and defensive warfare.
God had granted them the right to defend themselves and claim the promised land, but not to exploit or oppress others.
And even in the midst of war, there was a call for mercy. The chapter emphasizes the importance of extending mercy to those who surrendered peacefully and those who lived in cities far from the battlefield.
It's a reminder that even in times of conflict, compassion and restraint should be exercised. We should recognize the humanity of those who may oppose us and avoid unnecessary violence.
And the chapter also recognizes the importance of family and personal responsibilities. There were exemptions from military service for those who had recently built a house, planted a vineyard, or become engaged.
It's a beautiful acknowledgement that the strength and well-being of a nation are rooted in the stability and flourishing of its families and individuals.
And that leads us to chapter 21, which addresses a variety of legal and social matters, including procedures for dealing with unsolved murders, the treatment of female captives taken in war, the rights of inheritance for firstborn sons, and the handling of rebellious children.
It's a fascinating glimpse into how the Israelites approached justice, family dynamics, and the maintenance of social order.
It highlights the importance of accountability, compassion, and the preservation of family structures.
And speaking of social order, chapter 22 delves into a wide range of laws and regulations governing daily life, from the treatment of lost animals to the prohibition of mixed fabrics, the requirements for building safety, and the handling of accusations of sexual misconduct.
It's like a comprehensive guide to ethical living, covering everything from honesty and integrity to compassion and protection of the vulnerable.
And chapter 23 continues this exploration of laws and regulations. It addresses issues like ritual purity, the treatment of escaped slaves, the prohibition of prostitution, and the lending of money with interest.
It emphasizes the importance of maintaining holiness.
Right.
Extending compassion to those in need, and promoting fairness in economic transactions.
Yeah, it's a reminder that our faith should impact every aspect of our lives, our relationships, our finances, our work, everything.
That's a great point. And then chapter 24 addresses further legal matters, including guidelines for divorce, the protection of debtors' property, the treatment of hired servants.
It's a prohibition of collective punishment.
It's all about ensuring that individuals are treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their social or economic standing.
Right.
Justice, fairness, and compassion should be the guiding principles in all our interactions.
And as we move into chapter 25, we continue to see this emphasis on justice and fairness.
Right.
It outlines procedures for administering punishment, the practice of levirate marriage, the prohibition of dishonest weights and measures, and the command to remember the Amalekites' attack on the Israelites during their exodus from Egypt.
It's fascinating how these seemingly disparate topics are woven together. It highlights the importance of proportionality in punishment, preserving family lines, ensuring honesty in business dealings, and remembering past injustices so we can learn from them.
You're right. It's like a tapestry of ethical principles, showing how every aspect of life is interconnected.
And how our actions, both individually and collectively, have consequences.
And speaking of consequences, chapter 26 introduces the ritual of first fruits, where the Israelites offer a portion of their harvest to God as an expression of gratitude.
This beautiful ritual underscores the importance of acknowledging God's blessings. And recognizing that our prosperity comes from Him. It's an act of humility and thankfulness.
It makes me think about how we can cultivate that attitude of gratitude in our own lives, even when things are tough. It's so easy to focus on what we lack. But Deuteronomy reminds us to be thankful for what we have.
You've hit on a crucial point. Gratitude can be transformative, shifting our perspective and opening our hearts to God's provision.
Chapter 27 takes us to Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, where the Israelites participate in a dramatic ceremony. They pronounce blessings and curses on themselves, depending on their obedience or disobedience to God's covenant.
This powerful ceremony serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of our choices. It highlights the power of words to shape our destiny, and the importance of aligning our actions with what we say we believe.
It makes you think about the impact of our words, both on ourselves and on others. Are we speaking words of life and blessing, or are we sowing seeds of negativity and destruction?
It's a question worth pondering. Our words have incredible power, and Deuteronomy reminds us to use them wisely.
And chapter 28 expands on this theme of blessings and curses, providing a detailed description of the consequences of obedience and disobedience.
It paints a vivid picture of two paths. A path of flourishing and abundance for those who follow God's commands, and a path of hardship and suffering for those who rebel.
It's a powerful reminder that our choices have ripple effects, impacting not only ourselves, but also future generations.
It's a sobering thought, but also a hopeful one. It means we have the power to shape our future, both individually and collectively, by choosing to align ourselves with God's will.
And as we enter chapter 29, we witness the renewal of the covenant between God and the Israelites.
Moses underscores the seriousness of this commitment and emphasizes the consequences of breaking it.
This renewal emphasizes that the covenant isn't just a historical event, but an ongoing relationship that requires intentionality and dedication. It's a reminder that our relationship with God requires constant nurturing and renewal.
You're right. And chapter 30 offers a beautiful message of hope and restoration. Even if the Israelites stray from God's ways, they can find forgiveness and restoration if they return to Him with their whole heart.
It's a testament to God's unwavering love and mercy.
No
matter how far we've wandered, no matter how many mistakes we've made, there's always a path back to Him.
That's the heart of the gospel message. And it's woven throughout Deuteronomy.
And speaking of new beginnings, chapter 31 describes the transition of leadership from Moses to Joshua.
Right.
Moses is preparing to die. and Joshua is commissioned to lead the Israelites into the Promised Land.
What an emotional moment.
Yeah.
It's a poignant reminder that even the greatest leaders are human.
Right.
And that God's plan continues even as individuals pass from the scene.
And there's a beautiful emphasis on mentorship and preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Moses doesn't just hand over the reins.
Right.
He equips and empowers Joshua for the task ahead.
This reminds us of the importance of investing in the next generation of leaders.
Right.
We need to mentor, guide, and encourage those who will come after us.
Now, chapter 32 contains the Song of Moses.
Right.
It's a powerful and poetic reflection on God's faithfulness, the Israelites' tendency to rebel, and the consequences of their choices.
The song is a masterpiece of storytelling, weaving together history, theology, and prophecy. It's both a celebration of God's goodness and a lament over human failure.
It's almost like a musical summary of Deuteronomy's themes.
Yeah.
Leaving a lasting impression on the listener.
And in chapter 33, Moses pronounces blessings on each of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Okay.
He speaks words of favor and prosperity, recognizing their unique strengths and contributions.
It's a beautiful moment of unity and celebration. It reminds us that even though we may be different, we're all part of something bigger than ourselves.
And it highlights the importance of working together, valuing diversity, and supporting one another as we strive to fulfill God's purposes.
And finally, chapter 34 concludes the book of Deuteronomy with a poignant account of Moses' death and burial.
Yeah.
He ascends Mount Nebo, where God shows him a panoramic view of the Promised Land, a land that he himself will not enter.
It's a bittersweet ending.
Yeah.
Moses, the faithful leader who guided the Israelites for 40 years, is denied entry into the land because of his disobedience at Meribah.
It's a reminder that no one is above God's law. And that even the greatest leaders are accountable for their actions.
But even in this moment of loss, there's a sense of hope.
Yeah.
Joshua, empowered and prepared, is ready to lead the people forward.
Right.
The story doesn't end with Moses' death. It continues with a new generation carrying the torch.
And that's the beauty of Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
It's a book that speaks to us across the centuries, challenging us to remember to choose wisely and to embrace the transformative power of God's grace.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Deuteronomy, we're left with this question. What will your Deuteronomy be?
Wow.
What story will you write with your choices, your actions, and your unwavering commitment to the values that matter most?
That's a great question.
We'll leave you with that thought.
Okay.
Until next time, keep diving deep.